All right, guys, we're going to go over finding the lender and why they're important. So, in this case, let's take this all the way back. All right, the lender is going to give you something called a pre qualification letter. There's no way you could place an offer without a pre qualification letter. So, this is really important. And what's important is that this is the bank's way of telling the seller that they're going to financially back you to purchase the property. And the thing is, though, is that here's the current problem, right? You don't have money to buy a property. So when you hear people or salespeople say, "Oh, you're going to use other people's money, no money down," like you hear those people, right? "Oh, using other people's money," unless you're connected to like some fat private equity, right? We're talking about middle class loophole here, and the other people's money in this case, we're just basically using a bank. Okay, it's a really good marketing strategy, and don't get me wrong, I think it sounds pretty good. But in this case, we're going to use the bank's money and basically think of as a pre qualification letter as permission to use the bank's money to purchase residential multifamily real estate. Now, in order to get a pre qualification letter, you need some documentation. Now, if you recall how to get your financial house in order, boom, here it comes right here. This is the paperwork that you need. And we're going to go over it again just because I cannot emphasize how important this is. You need a current year's tax return, last year's tax return. You need current year's W-2 or 1099, last year's W-2 or 1099, 2 months of bank statements, 2 months of pay stubs, copy of a driver's license, and a credit score. Those are all the documents that you will need in order to get pre-approved for a loan. And then once you're pre-approved, the documentation that shows that you're pre-approved is the pre-qualification letter. So that's how you get a pre-qualification letter, is by obtaining all this documentation and submitting it for the letter to approve to for the lender to approve you. Now, ratios. This is important too. So for instance, there's something called a debt to income ratio. So for instance, this is all this is how we're able to get you qualified for a loan. So for instance, if a mortgage payment puts all of your combined debt payments over 49.9%, the likelihood of you getting approved for a loan to purchase a property is pretty much zero. So basically, what happens at a ratio is a number that tracks the likelihood of you making your payments faithfully. Okay. So that is where that number comes from. So, for instance, when you get pre qualified for a loan, when you have your car payments and your credit card payments and your student loans, that's kind of the reason why it's important for you to not get that BMW or that Mercedes Benz that costs you $400 a month. Yeah, like you probably make 4 grand a month, which is really good. And then all of a sudden, it's just going to push you over, and we'll go over that in a moment. So let's go over those numbers. So yeah, the debt to income ratio is simply a ratio that tracks the likelihood of you making your payments, and also determines how much you can qualify for. Now, here's an illustration of how the debt to income ratio works. Is, let's say your total monthly income is $4,000 and you had a car payment of $270 and you had student loan payment of $150, and then your mortgage payment you now cannot exceed $1,576. Okay. If I added the 270, the 150, and 1577, that would make my debt payment at $1,997. And that would put me at 0.499. So I probably would qualify for a mortgage at that case. But then remember the mortgage of 1577, if you find a cheaper insurance policy, maybe you can get that number down lower. But ideally, what you would want to do is sell your car, and you might take a hit on a grand or two or whatever. But I would advise, if you bought that fat Mercedes Benz and then you are taking this class, for the first property, sell that Benz, man. Sell the Benz and get the real estate portfolio built up. And then if you have a student loan payment, you're going to just stick with that because the interest is so low that if it would be a lot faster for you to eliminate your car payment and take a $2,000 loss on your car than it would than paying your student loan payment. Because if you have to come up 25 grand to pay your student loan off, it's just not worth it. Um, so yeah, I would base, and if you have credit card payments as too, this which is not even in this illustration, get rid of those credit card payments so that way you can buy this asset. And not to mention, once you secure the property, you're going to want credit in the event that, hey, listen, I want to put new flooring or new windows or a new AC unit or something. If you don't use an FHE 203K, having that line of credit is going to be important. So I would say if you do have credit card debt, pay that off as well. And this is just kind of like for the first property, you're going to have to make some sacrifices. And I think that in the long run, in about 5, 6 years, you're going to be very thankful that, you got rid of that Benz or you paid down your credit card and stuff like that. So anyway, it's just a strategy for the first property. Later down the road, you're going to have a lot of equity where you can then figure out what you want to do. So anyway, so basically, guys, that's it. That's how it all works.